to my channel, Sewing with Tay. I'm Fantasia of the Aya Emporium. Welcome. Today I am doing another hand knit sweater tutorial or knit along. If you are new here, I make sewing videos, sewing tutorials, sewing hacks, pattern reviews. I try to document my mini lock journey, but I keep forgetting to do that. And I absolutely love plants, so if any of that is up your alley, hit the like button and subscribe so you know when I'm making new videos. So let's get into today. I have these hand knit sweaters, as a lot of you know, because that's the videos that get the most traction on my page. It's going into fall, and I'm thinking about hosting another hand knit sweater class in person, but I wanted to refresh my skills. So I have a niece who's 3, and I'm deciding to make her own hand knit sweater. So I'm gonna take you along the journey today as I hand knit a sweater for her. Let's get into it. So my niece is 3, and I'm going to make a short one, not like a maxi length. Oh, that would be cute though. We're gonna stick with the short one because that's what I planned. I have tons of yarn left over from last year, so I'm using some leftover yarn that I have. So we're gonna make a short one, like hip level and long sleeve. We're in Ohio, so it's still kind of warm right now, but it is going back and forth. We probably got another couple weeks. Once October hits, it's not gonna be above 80 no more. So I'm looking forward to her wearing this sweater. So I did take her measurements when I was babysitting, and her chest was 23. Her sleeve length was 18, and the total length I'm going for is 18 inches. So hopefully this doesn't take long to do, because I made these full oversized ones for myself and for other people, and it took me like 5 hours. So I'm hoping I can do this really quickly. All of these measurements I'm going to take on the half. So half of the front, half of the back. So we have 23, so like 11 and a half. For the width of this, so that's the measurement that I'm going to use for the width of the jacket. And I don't know what the armhole depth is on a 3-year-old. I work with, you know, making clothes for, you know, just adults, so we just gonna estimate. I'm gonna look at some of my son's clothes. Oh, and my light went off. Okay, that's fun. But I'm gonna look at some of my son's clothes. I'm a boy mom. I have 2 boys, but an armhole depth is an armhole depth. So we'll figure out how wide we need to make the sleeves, and then we'll work through it together. Now let's get into it. I am pretty sure this is a Bernat yarn from Joann's. I bought this last year and I didn't use it. So this is my yarn. I'm using chunky, extra thick yarn, and we're gonna start into making our chain for our first row. Alright, here's my yarn, and we're going to start with doing a slip knot. So I like to hold my yarn like this, kind of hold it here at the bottom, the tail, and this is going to be referred to as the working yarn because this is what's connected to our ball of yarn. So I'm going to make it just like that. I'm going to give it a twist just like that, and then I'm going to reach down and pull the working yarn through to make a slip knot. And then you just want to pull this until it gets tight. The goal is I want it to be about 2 fingers wide. So about there, you'll have something that looks like this. So here's my working yarn. This is loop number 1. This is your tail. We don't need that. So here is our working yarn, and you want to try to direct your yarn in the direction that you're going. So I'm going to take my 2 fingers, I'm going to put them inside the hole, and I'm going to pull my working yarn through the loop to make another loop like this. Another. You want to make sure your loop is staying about 2 fingers wide, and it will look like this, and come through. This one looks a little big, and pull it back a little bit. So like this. This 1, 2, 3, 4. So then you start to get this like chain of stitches. And you want to make sure that you're grabbing your yarn the same way every time. Meaning, take your 2 fingers, go through here, and pull the yarn through. You don't want to then take your yarn and then pull it through that way. You don't want to do that. So you're just going to keep going. I have my paper here. Her chest was 23. I just decided I'm going to do 12 just to make it easy, even math, and it'll give her a little ease over the body. So we're going to do 12. So we're going to keep going until this equals 12 inches. And I don't know. There it is. Where my tape measure went to. Here's my tape measure. I'm at about 10 inches right now. This loop is a little big. And I'm not a knitter. I'm not a knitter by any stretch of the imagination. Hand knitting is what I can do. So when it comes to counting loops and counting rows, that's not my cup of tea. I will count them and attempt to keep them, but not my area of expertise. That's not my ministry. So I think we're close. I like this about 12 inches right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, this loop is a little big, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Looks like about 11 loops. I'm going to write that down. And this is row 1. I'm just going to use a tick mark so that we know. So now we're going to start knitting back this way. And when we do that, we're going to pull the yarn that way. So to make our second row, we're going to take our yarn here and we're going to pull it through. Hold on, I'm forgetting. This is our last loop. Alright, so we're going to take our working yarn here and you're just going to go right back into that loop we just made previous to this one. You're going to take your yarn and you're going to pull it back through that loop there to make a new loop. And then you're going to keep going all the way back. So you want to keep them relatively the same size. And the goal here is we're going to go back to the loops we just made and we want to make sure that we're ending up with 11 loops. It might be 10 because I always screw up on this last loop. So we're going to push this one through the opening. Make sure we're keeping them about the same size. Just like that. And this fabric is fuzzy. It's a little hard to see. See if I can zoom in just a little bit. So you have our loop right here. We're going to take our working yarn and we're going to pull it through. And again, we want to make sure that we are always pulling the yarn the same direction. We don't want to flip it and push it down instead of pushing it up. So here we are. Looks like we got about we have one more. This makes 11. I can pull it through. There we go. That one was a little tight. So we'll end up with something that looks kind of like this. It will start to curve and curl. That's okay. So we have our loops and it looks like this. So that's row number 2. Make sure you make a note of that. And now we are going to pull our yarn going back this way and we're going to keep going. So you're going to take your yarn and you're going to make sure you go the same direction. That loop looks a little big. And we're going to pull it through. Just like that. You want to make sure they're not getting too big. It's a little big. And keep going and pull this through like that. Too big of a loop. And we're going to keep going. So now that is row 3. Make a little note there. And we're just going to keep doing this. I'm going to unwind some of this thread. I mean, I say thread and yarn interchangeably all the time, y'all. So I'm going to unwind some of this yarn. And then we're going to go back the other direction. Pull this out. Making sure we keeping them close together. The loop's not too big. Pull it through. And pull it through. And we're just going to keep doing this back and forth. And I'm counting the rows because I always make an attempt at counting the rows, but I'm not that great at it, as I told y'all already. So I'm just going to keep doing this, and then once I get to a certain point, I take out my tape measure and I just measure it. So here we are. That would be row number 4, and we are currently at about 4 inches. And the goal is 18 inches. So I might not have enough yarn for this, honestly. So we're going to keep going. So here's our back. And to start the shoulder, I didn't think about this in the beginning because I kind of forgot. It's been a while since I've made one of these. But I have an uneven number of loops. So we have 11 loops. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11. So normally what you would do is you would split these in half. You have 5 for one shoulder, 5 for the other shoulder. But because we have an uneven number, it'd be 6 and 5. It's not that big of a deal. Or at least not to me. So what we're going to do is, I like to get a safety pin or a clip or something of that nature so that I know where I'm stopping. So we're going to say this side is 6, 2, 4, 5. So this one here is my center, like where I'm going to stop knitting. So I'm going to put a pin here holding loop number 4 and 5 together so that I don't mistakenly knit those. So here's my working yarn. Here's what's left of my working yarn. I am going to continue to knit just this one side for the same amount of rows or same length that I did this. So I'm going to keep knitting just on one side of the garment. So my working yarn is here. I'm going to continue to knit on these 6 loops. And I picked this red yarn because I like red, but I also really like green. And I realized I don't have a lot of this, actually. I don't have a lot of this yarn, but I have tons of other colors. So I don't know what made me make that decision, but here we are. So I might run out of yarn and I might have to go buy some more. But, or maybe make the sleeves a different color. So here is, I just did row 1. So I'm going to start my row count over. Number 1, mark it on my paper. And then I'm going to keep going. So I got to the end here, and then I'm going to go back. So we're going to go make our loops again, just on these 6 loops. You want to make sure that you are continuing to make your loops a little bit small. I feel like some of those loops were a little big there. And you want to make sure that you're continuing to knit the same direction. You will notice that you have your rows here, but if you look on this side, it goes like left to right. So if you mistakenly start knitting the other way, you will start to see like a mix of stitches and rows or purls on the right side of the sweater. So this was row 2, and we're just going to keep doing this until we get to row 17. And you're gonna do all of that just on these 6, and then when we get to row 17 we will cast it off, and then we'll come back and we'll do the other side. So make your loops not too big, and then when I get to the end of this, I'll show you guys what to do to add in more yarn if you run out, or if you want to do like multiple colors, you want to feed in a different color yarn like stripes or something of that sort. I'll show you how to add that yarn in so that you can do that. That was 3. This is 4. 2, 4, 6. And then we're gonna continue. Feel like my yarn is getting a little short here, so I'm gonna get my other skein so that I can tie on my new ball of yarn. So here's my tail right there, and you'll see here we're starting to get like an extension that will become the front of the body. Alright, here's my tail, here's my new working yarn. We're just going to tie these together like so. I'm going to make it kind of tight. You're going to get a little knot like this. And then you're just going to take some good scissors and you're going to cut off your tails. Got our yarn there, and then we're just going to keep going. I feel like I may or may not. That doesn't. Okay, looks okay. I feel like I may have forgot to write down what row I was on, but we're just going to keep going. That would be 5. And now I'm going to actually turn her around, make my life a little easier. If you're going to do that, you have to remember to make sure that you're still inserting your yarn in the same direction, which is from the bottom up. So here's my yarn, and I'm just going to keep going. Oops, it's getting a little big. Try to keep consistent. I'm going a little bit fast here, but you do not have to go this fast. I think I will pause and speed it up, hopefully up until this point you guys are understanding. Once you get the hang of like making the loops, is literally the same repetitive motion for about 50-60 rows of loops. So nothing's changing. We're just going to keep making loops. We want to make sure they stay tight, and you'll see you get little gaps and things when, you know, they might get a little bit too big, so you want to make sure you're kind of keeping them tight, but not too tight that you can't pull them through, or that you begin to like lose them, like not be able to find the hole. And if you ever need to check, make sure you didn't drop any stitches. 2, 4, 6. I have 6 rows, 6 loops. Let's mark that. And then I'm going to speed it up so I can get through this half. All right, I've gotten to the end of my row for this section. So now we're going to cast off to close this row off. So here is my first loop. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new loop, just one, like this. And then I'm going to take this loop and loop it over the next loop. So now I have this loop here. I'm going to take my yarn, make a new loop, and then I'm going to pull it over the next loop, just like that. Then I'm going to take my working yarn, make a new loop, take my working yarn loop, put it over the next loop, pull it through, and then I'm going to take the working yarn, pull it through again. One more, we're going to go over the next yarn. You're going to take your working yarn here, you're going to pull it through, and then you're going to take your working yarn over the last loop, pull it through, and then we're going to take this yarn and pull it through, and then we're going to cut it like that, and then we're going to pull it all the way out. And there we have our casted off end of our front panel. Alright, now we have our other side. So this is our back. This is one of our side fronts. Now we have to do the other side front the same way. So we have 5 loops on this side. You put a pin in here to hold those loops. So we're going to pull out our 5 loops here. We're going to take our working yarn and we're going to make a loop just like that. And then we are going to thread it into the loop on the end. You do want to make sure you have a bit of a tail there, tail hanging here, but you want your loop to be the same size as all the rest of the loops. Did I lose one? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 now. So here's my first loop, and we're just going to loop it in there like that. And then we're just going to start going just like we would do normally. But actually, did that wrong. My loops are coming from underneath, so we're going to go under here like this. Keep the tail, keep this tight. So here's our working yarn that's connected to the ball, and we're just going to come in and we're going to start making new loops on our 5 loops that are here. So that is row 1. Make it out, and then you're going to go back and forth all the way to the same length as we did on the other ones. This is a little big for me. So we're going to go pull this one through. We're going to pull this one through, this one through, this one through, this one's a little, and pull this one through here. So that makes row number 2. Mark it down. So we're going to keep going. I usually like to tie this little tail. They don't say that, but I don't know. It just makes sense to me. I like to make a little knot there so it don't keep pulling out. So here, we're on row 3. Got our working yarn. We're going to pull it through. Keeping them small, 2 finger widths. Just like this. That's row 3. I'm going to go back the other way. And as you'll start to see, we're getting a left panel and a right panel. And we're going to pull off some yarn. And then we're just going to keep going. Alright, we have made it to the end of the opposite side of the front. So now we're going to do our chain stitch. We're going to make a new loop. Take our first loop, put it over the second one. It's a little bit too big. And then we're going to take our working yarn and make a new loop. First loop over the next one. Working yarn. New loop. New loop over the next yarn, working yarn, new loop over the last one, working yarn, new loop. Then we're going to give her a trim, and we're going to pull her all the way through. So there is our left and our right fronts. So here is what the sweater looks like. It is a very hefty sweater. This is the right side of the fabric or the sweater. This is the wrong side. So now we're just going to stitch up the sides and do a sleeve, a mini sleeve. I wanted these sleeves to be about 16 inches from center back. So this is about 8. So I'm going to do about 7 to 8 inches this way. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to get a piece of yarn. This is all I have left, so I'm going to have to go buy some more. But we're going to take a little piece of yarn and we're going to thread it through here up until about this point right here. If you can see where that is from the top edge, it's about 6 inches. So about 6 inches from the top edge, we're going to stop. And then we're going to start making new loops around this area to start the sleeve. So we're going to work through that now. Alright, this is the end of my yarn. I'm going to take these last 2 loops of the front and the back, and I'm going to pull my yarn through here, through the top and the bottom layers. And I like to tie a knot, because to me, that's what makes sense. And then you have to have a long enough piece of yarn to like make it to here, but then also kind of start your sleeve. So it's a little tedious to have to pull this long piece of yarn through here, but in my head it just makes the most sense. So I have my working yarn here. It's like really long. It's basically the rest of the yarn that I have, but if you want to cut your yarn maybe like 2 or 3 times the length of what this is, but I'm going to pull all of this yarn through here. There we go. So now I like to kind of fold this in half. Kind of makes my life a little easier. And we're going to find the next loop. The next loop on the top and the bottom. You're going to take your working yarn and you're just going to pull it through. Kind of like stitching, sewing it all together. Get your workout in today with pulling this back and forth through there. So we're going to keep going. Now we're on the bottom. I'm going to take those 2 last loops. You're going to pull your yarn through. Oh, my tape measure got caught in there. Alright. Now we're on the top. I'm going to take the next one. That's all of my working yarn. And you can cut this if you want to, and then tie on a new yarn once we get to the part that starts the sleeve. But I kind of like to keep it one continuous piece if I have the ability to do so. Take this one and this loop here. Next loop. And they're like, this fabric is fuzzy, so it's hard to really see the exact loop. At least for me, I'm not an experienced knitter, so maybe for the people who knit for real, it's easier for them to do this. But I am just finding 2 loops that look relatively close together to the previous loop and using that to make the next stitch, so that there isn't any like big gaps or anything on the side of the sweater. Alright, a couple more. These 2 loops here look good. I'm going to pull that through. So now we're kind of at, I think I want to do one more. This is my safety pin. I put a safety pin to mark kind of where I wanted to start my sleeve. So I'm going to pull this stitch over because it's a little bit of a gap there. And I'm going to put my last row right here. And we're going to pull this all the way through. Almost there. Alright, so our side seam is now sewn together. And now we have this opening here for our sleeve. So what we are going to do now is what we always do. We're going to make some loops. So here is my working yarn. This is a loop here. I'm going to take my working yarn and I'm going to make a new loop right through there. And twist this so that it's going that way. Just like that. Not too big, remember? And you're just going to pick off that last loop and create a new loop. And we're just going to go all the way around just like that. So you see so far we have 3 loops, or 4 loops. And then we're going to keep going. It's a little big. And one thing you do want to make sure is that your purl stitches are on the wrong side. So you see I'm kind of starting a row of purl stitches here as I'm looping this through. You don't want them to be on this side. You want to try to continue the knits and the purls on the same side. So that would mean pulling your yarn the same way. For me, that's bottom up over when I'm inserting them. So we're getting close here. There's a loop here. Oh, that's a really big loop. We'll make that smaller. Oops, don't pull it out. And then we have a loop here. So now we have loops all the way around our sleeve, our armhole. And now the important thing is that these loops will get kind of lost in here. So you want to make sure that you're not losing or slipping a stitch. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 loops, it seems like. So here's my working yarn. And since it's a circle, we're just going to keep kind of going around. And as far as length, I'm not going to count the rows. I'm just going to measure it because I want it to be about 6 to 7 inches long. So you're just going to keep working your way all the way around, making sure you pull your yarn the same way, in from the back, out. And you don't want to have a big space in between there. So if you find that you have a long stitch here, you want to pull it so that it's a little bit tighter. So you want have your loop here, have your loop here. The bottom thread is this piece here. You don't want this piece to be super long. You want to try to keep it tight. And then you're just going to continue to knit around. And it's easy if you move your yarn around with you as you go. That way you can worry less about your stitches slipping. And then we're just going to keep going. Move it around. And it does get a little bulky. They do tend to like kind of roll in. So you just want to make sure you're not skipping any. Trying to keep it flat. And I do worry about my sleeves getting too long, and I'm getting to the end of my thread, so on my yarn. So I am going to triple check how long I am currently at. So I'm at about 13 inches. I feel like it needs to be a little bit longer than this. Alright, I decided that I'm just going to use what I have, which is black. And we're going to tie this bad boy on, and it's going to have a partially black sleeve, and it's going to have a black sleeve on the other side. So we're going to tie you on super tight. We're going to clip it. Scissors is not cooperating. There we go. We got our yarn going, our working yarn going. And we're going to finish her up. This was 13 inches. So I probably want to do like 3 more rows. Especially now that it's contrast. Maybe let's just do 4. I do have an idea. So this is just a straight, kind of square, open sleeve. I think I'm going to combine 1 row of loops so that I can get a little bit of the tapered look as it goes down. So I'm going to do 1 more row of this black so we'll get a solid full stripe in here. And then I'm going to combine them. And by combining them, it is an easy way. Basically, you just want to put 2 loops together. And for 1 row, of loops, you're going to start to combine them, like 2 loops together. Then that way you'll end up with less loops, and it will gradually get a little bit smaller. Don't know if that's getting harder to see because it is black. A little extra light in here. So here's what we have so far. So I'm getting to what would be, I would call the beginning of a row, which is right here. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to make a loop. And then for this one, alright, so we have our loop here, and I am going to combine these 2. I'm going to put 2 loops together, and then I am going to make a new loop. And then on this side, I'm going to combine this one in the next loop. No, I'm going to do this one. I'm going to thread or make 1 chain here, and then I'm going to take these 2 and then make a single loop. like that. And then I'm going to make a new loop and then take that new one and the next one and thread them together. And then the same thing here. I'm going to make a new loop. Take that new loop along with the next one and make a new loop here. And then we have one more. We're going to make those, put those two together. Make a new loop. Go to the next one. Make a new loop. A little too big. Combine it with the next one. And then make a new loop. And I feel like we are right about at the beginning again. So now I'm just going to do 2 more of these rows, and I feel like that should be more than enough because I feel like it's getting long. Yeah, we're like 15-16 inches. So here, I'm just going to start just regular threading our loops through again. You might have to pull them a little bit tighter so there isn't gaps since we combined some loops to kind of taper it down a bit. Oh, there's like a hole here. Make sure you don't have any big gaps. I feel like this is going to be my last one. There we are. So here is the end of this. Now we are going to cast off. So I'm going to start here. Going to make a new loop. Going to grab the next loop, pull it over, make a new loop. Go through the next one. Nope. Make a new loop. Yeah. No. Take your loop here, pull it over, make a new loop. Take your loop, pull it over the next one, make a new loop. Take your loop, pull it over the next one, make a new loop. Make a new one. Did that wrong. There we go. Make a new loop. Pull it over the next one. I think that's the end of it. And we're going to pull her right through there. We're going to snip it. Pull it through. And then once you get to the end, you're just going to tuck these threads, or these longer pieces, so you'll just kind of weave them through. And you just tuck them in. So here we go. I'm going to cut that off. So here's our slightly tapered sleeve. So now we're going to go to the other side here. I had a piece of yarn that was already cut and has some sparkly stuff on it. And we're going to do the same thing on this side. But we're going to use this black yarn because I ran out of the red. Tie her tight. And we're going to basically sew her up with this black thread. And down through. And back up. And back down. Oh, almost forgot to mark my opening. Yes, that's good there. So now we're going to take this yarn and we're going to start to do her sleeve on this side. Alright, here is my relatively finished sweater. I'm going to trim my tails. I'm going to tuck them in. I'm just going to tuck them in between a couple of stitches. Final trim. One more on this side. Alright, so here is my sweater, and we're just going to flip her inside out, or right side out. See how it looks. Oh, she's so cute. Alright, here is her sweater. So I had to piece in the black, and I think it's going to be super cute on. I'm going to see if I can get some pictures of her wearing her little sweater. It is hefty, it's thick, it's lofty. This is definitely a for show sweater versus a like functional wear this everyday sweater, but it's super cute. But yeah, that's all I got for today. If you have any questions, please leave me a comment and I will get back to you, and I will do follow-up Q&As if you still have more questions. I'll put links to where my yarn comes from, and I have 2 or 3 other hand knit videos, so if you need more details, there's videos over there too. But thank y'all so much for watching my video and hanging out with me. This took a lot longer than expected and used more yarn than expected. I'm going to try to round up the idea of how much yarn I actually used, but it is done. I can get some pictures of my niece wearing this cute little sweater as we head into fall. But until next time, bye.